Hello everybody, in today's video we're going to be going over a very widespread central United States snowstorm which is going to be impacting parts from the northern Rockies down through the central plains and then into parts of Texas, Oklahoma, New Mexico, and even into Arizona where you guys could be seeing some snowfall. We could be seeing snowfall amounts in the Rockies as high as 3 or 4 feet of snowfall, as well as some amounts in the plains and lower elevated regions up to about 18 inches of snowfall. We'll be giving you my personal snowfall and ice accumulation forecast at the end of the video, so make sure you don't miss that. And we'll also be talking about briefly the very cold effects that are going to be taking place after this storm, where you could have record-breaking cold temperatures, and we'll talk about that in just one moment. So before we do get into it, let's start off with the current National Weather Service page. Winter storm warnings in effect for parts of Washington, Idaho, Montana, and even a little bit of Wyoming there. We see some winter weather advisories surrounding that, as well as some winter storm watches, which will most likely be upgraded to winter storm warnings in Nebraska, South Dakota, and Wyoming, and maybe some winter weather advisories as you get further north into North Dakota and Montana. That's where you could be looking at maybe 6 or more inches of snowfall at least in those regions. Freeze warnings in effect for parts of Nebraska, Iowa, Missouri, parts of Kansas, Oklahoma, and Texas, as well as some freeze watches further to the south and to the east of there. We also have more freeze watches back in parts of Nevada, Arizona, and California, as well as some red flag warnings for parts of the central Rockies, as well as northern California, and some high wind watches in effect for areas in northwestern California. And we even have some winter weather advisories for the UP of Michigan, mainly just for some lake effect. Freeze watches are also up for areas around Seattle, and then we have some scattered wind advisories throughout parts of the northwestern United States. So generally just some scattered watches and warnings, but you definitely see all those cold and snow related warnings that are just being set up in advance of the storm. Now, here is a look at the National Weather Service's forecast for your low temperatures over the next 3 days. So let's start off at Sunday. So this is skipping Saturday. Let's go to Sunday, the 25th of October. Anywhere in that circle around the actual low temperature forecast, that circle, that's indicating that you could have a record-breaking low temperature if that circle were to be, if that forecast were to be accurate, or if it would even be colder than the forecast. So you see all those records for parts of the Northwest and also for parts of the northern plains, where anywhere in those kind of I don't know what kind of color to describe that as, maybe a green, where you're seeing those 0 degree or lower readings. Here would be by Monday, and you see those record-breaking temperatures get widespread even further to the east, so over portions of the Northwest down through the northern Rockies and then into the central plains. You're looking at record-breaking cold. And then here would be for Tuesday, the 27th of October, the last day of this big snowstorm, I guess you could say, and we're looking at more of those record-breaking low temperatures. Now, let's start talking about the European model and what it's showing. Then we'll look at the GFS model. Then we'll look at the modeled snowfall for this event, and then we'll look at my personal snowfall forecast at the very end of the video. So here would be by Friday morning, October 23rd. So this would actually be a couple hours after, or actually before I'm making this. So just kind of giving you a preview. This is mainly just because the European model was loaded in the morning time. Of course, I'm making this in the afternoon time, so there will be a little bit of a delay. But you see, we have really cold temperatures for parts of the Northwest. That 32-degree line, by the way, is the 30. That red line is the 32-degree line. So anywhere north of there is below 32 degrees, and you see that for much of the northern Rockies and northern plains. We're starting to see our system start to move through parts of British Columbia, and then it dips down into the northern Rockies. And I'll play this through a little bit more. Here would be by Saturday morning, so tomorrow morning, and we're dealing with quite a bit of snowfall into parts of Montana, Idaho, Wyoming, and even getting into parts of the Dakotas. We're seeing this frontal system move by. That'll bring in some preliminary cold air behind it that'll actually set the stage for some of this snowfall. Now, let's move this forward even more. As we're starting to heat up into the daytime hours, this would be right around Saturday in the early afternoon hours, as we're going to around 3 or 4 p.m. Central Time, and you're looking at some very cold temperatures as well as some snowy conditions for portions of the northern Rockies and the Dakotas. And then this progresses further to the south and to the east. Here would be by Sunday morning, as you're waking up and you're seeing snowflakes over parts of the northern plains, the upper Midwest, and through portions of the central plains and Rockies, where we're looking looking at some heavy snowfall amounts that maybe you could get half an inch to an inch per hour snowfall rates in some of those isolated bands. Now, as we move forward here, this would be by Sunday early afternoon, the 25th of October. You're starting to see that mixed line, that mixed precipitation line, where you could be seeing rain and snow at the same time. And then further to the south, this is the first time you're really seeing rain being outputted from the system, and that's just because the atmosphere would be too warm to support any snow in those regions. Here would be by Sunday night. Here's into early on Monday morning, and we're seeing a wide band of snow from the UP of Michigan down through parts of Utah and Arizona, and then coming back northeastward, where you're looking at some heavy snowfall. And I would say a good way to describe this is light to moderate snowfall through the early morning time on Monday. Then as we get to the morning time on Monday, this is where your real problem arises, where we're going to see this system break off and move to the east, but you're going to see this next lingering one over parts of the Four Corners. And what you're going to start to see is, because the atmosphere above your head, and I'll make a little demonstration. So imagine that this would be the atmosphere, and this is the surface right here. Here's your surface, and then higher up in the atmosphere, you actually have a small area of, in this pink, 32 degree plus temperatures, where you're actually above 32 degrees. But then look at the surface. You might have colder than 32 degree temperatures at the surface. So you're dealing with these rain droplets starting out as rain higher up in the atmosphere, then coming down, and they don't have enough time to freeze into snowflakes. So what they end up becoming is ice upon contact, and that's what your real that's a pretty good demonstration of how this kind of works. And that's being indicated by that pink over portions of Texas and New Mexico. So let's move this forward even more, and you see that ice precipitation intensifies, and you start to see a thin corridor, and that's going to be the hardest thing with this forecast. Where does that 32 degree line set up? Does it set up like the European model showing further north and west, or what the GFS is showing is a lot further to the south and east? As we get into Tuesday morning, it really starts to break up, though, and then you start to see a really big part of the southern part of the system breaks off, and you start to see a really big ice storm and winter storm, depending on exactly where you are, over portions of Texas and Oklahoma, and then it switches over to mainly rain after that. Let's start talking about what the GFS model is showing, and then we'll look at the snowfall totals from these models, and then my forecast. Now, here would be by Friday afternoon, so this would be basically right now. And then as we're getting into tomorrow morning, and as we get into tomorrow, as you're waking up and into the early afternoon, we're starting to look at the snowfall transition from portions of the northwest, and move from portions of the northwest down south and east into portions of the central plains and the northern plains, and then it'll eventually dip down further to the south. Now, here would be by early on Sunday morning. Here would be by as you're waking up on Sunday, and you're looking at some of that snowfall spreading from Iowa and Minnesota westward to some scattered flakes in parts of Utah, Colorado, and Wyoming. Here would be a zoomed out look, because this storm is actually getting rather wide. We can't even capture it on just one view, so we have to look at the entire continental United States to get a good view of this, where we're looking at snow now fairly heavy, actually, over portions of the Midwest, and you are going to see a couple isolated bands where you could get into some very dangerous snowfall amounts. Now, here would be by Sunday night getting into Monday morning, and that's where this is when your real snowfall starts to be outputted. You're seeing this rain snow line a lot further to the south and east, and then the GFS model really wants to crank out a really heavy ice storm. Here would be by Monday afternoon. Here's the evening time. You start to get a little bit of a lull in the storm, and then it comes right back out with a big ice storm, where you're seeing maybe half an inch of ice per every 3 or 4 hours. And then as we move this forward, it sticks over that same area, and that would be very detrimental if that were to be the case. I think this is a bit of an over exaggeration from the GFS, and I don't exactly buy this, and you'll see that reflected within my personal forecast in just one moment. So that's just wrapping up that storm, and we see that storm kind of dips further to the south. Most of these models bring something back up, maybe another minor system for portions of the southern plains. We'll have to see about that, and if that does happen, I'll definitely cover it on my channel. Now, Here's a forecast from the European model and what it's showing, and we see in those blues 2 to 6 inches, 6 to 10 in the purples, 10 to 20 in these pinks, and then as you get into the lighter pinks and even into the blues, that's where you're between 20 and about 40 inches. You only see that for the extreme higher elevation areas in the Rockies, but we see a good swath of 6+ inches through parts of the Central Plains, and even if you're not in the 6-inch plus area, you're looking at a wider area of 2-inch plus regions that go from portions of the portions of southern and western Canada to portions of the central United States. Here's the GFS model, and I'll go back and forth here. You can see how much further south and east the GFS model has this compared to what the European model has, and even shows a 6-inch band going down into southeastern Kansas, Missouri, Oklahoma, and Texas. And I really don't think that's going to be the case. Even though the GFS has been fairly accurate up to now, I don't think it's going to be that intense of a storm that far south and east. Now let's start looking at what my forecast is. Now this is going from today all the way until the 27th. Mountain snow there for portions of the Black Hills in South Dakota, and then also down through parts of the Rockies and into even parts of the southern Rockies. That's where I'm expecting mountain snow, and that's really elevation dependent and something that I just can't really forecast with too much accuracy without knowing exactly the geography of those regions. So that's just something you have to leave up to your local officials, where they actually do a fairly good job of detailing exactly how much snowfall you should see depending on your elevation. Under an inch of snowfall expected for much of the areas, basically from northern Illinois parallel south and west to portions of northern Missouri, southern Kansas, into western Oklahoma and Texas. That's kind of your boundary line of under an inch of snowfall, and that's where I do think you'll see at least some dusting or so on maybe some colder surfaces. 1 to 3 inches here for much of the areas just north and west of that rain snow line. 3 to 6 inches of snowfall for portions of the Rockies and basically everywhere east of the Rockies until you hit about Iowa, Minnesota, and Wisconsin. That's where it kind of cuts off there. But this is where I think you're going to have a decent accumulation of 3 or more inches, maybe even up to 5 or 6 inches. If you're in this pink region, I'm expecting 6 to 12 inches of snowfall, and that goes from Minnesota and Iowa westward. And then as you get into the Dakotas and western Nebraska, that's where it's a really solid area of 6+ inches of snowfall. This is just where I think it's not really going to switch over to rain, so you'll see a lot more in the way of snowfall. 12 to 18 inches in that darker purple, where you're looking at over northern Colorado, parts of Wyoming, Nebraska, South Dakota, and into Montana. That's where you're looking at 12 to 18 inches, so a foot plus in these regions are forecasted, and then 18 to 24 inches as you get closer to the Rockies in northern and central Colorado, north central Colorado, and then as you get into north central Wyoming and western parts of Montana there, that's where I'm looking at maybe 1.5 feet to as much as 2 feet of snowfall. And of course in those higher elevation regions you could get as much as 3 feet of snowfall. Now here is my ice forecast for this. Under 1/10 of an inch for portions of the areas from northwestern Texas, basically straight north and east into parts of Illinois, Indiana, and Wisconsin. This is where I don't think icing will be too big of a deal, but I do think you'll see at least some switch over to icy precipitation. Maybe this is just 1/100th of an inch, 2/100th of an inch, so it's not something that's going to be too significant. But then this is really the bullseye area where I think you might get as much as 1/10 of an inch to as much as 1/4 of an inch of ice accumulation, and I wouldn't be surprised if you get a couple pockets over 1/2 an inch of ice accumulation in parts of Oklahoma, Kansas, and Missouri. Exactly where that band sets up, that's going to be a big decider. And that's going to be something that is too far out to forecast right now, so I'm going to keep the amounts fairly low for right now. But as we get closer to this event, I'll definitely update you guys at least 1 or 2 more times on this storm, and if something drastic changes, I might update this. The big deal is, where exactly is this second system going to form? Is it going to form over the western four corners or the eastern four corners or in the southern plains? That's going to be a big factor into where you see most of your ice accumulation out of the storm. So I hope you guys did all enjoy the video. Please consider liking the video, subscribing, and turning on notifications, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Goodbye.